Fox Business Alert: the world awaiting President Trump's self-described Liberation Day tariff announcement. We are 31 minutes away. We expect the president to begin the event in the White House Rose Garden right at the moment, right? Just after the closing bell. It's interesting. He was supposed to do it during this hour. At least that's what we had originally heard yesterday. Somebody probably said, let's let the markets close so that we don't cause too much storm and drang. All right, the U.S., let's talk about trade deficits. It's got a trade deficit of $1.2 trillion with countries around the globe, but none of these deficits is bigger than the trade imbalance with China, which amounts to nearly $295 billion. The U.S. imports $64 billion alone in cell phones and household products, but America's largest import from China is soybeans. That works out to about $13 billion. The president believes that by using tariffs as his weapon of choice, he will level the playing field by either inspiring foreign companies to manufacture here in the United States or get Americans to buy American-made versus Chinese goods. Let's get to Michael Pillsbury of the Heritage Foundation. He's the Senior Fellow for China Strategy and a Fox News contributor. So glad you're here. Actually, you're in Washington, so yes. I hope you're telling me you had like the Dixie cup and the string to the Oval Office. But you've been such a valued advisor to the president on all things China. I got to ask you right off the bat, which country do you think will get hit hardest by the tariffs announced in 29 minutes?
Well, there are different ways of kind of measuring who's going to get hit the hardest, Liz. I think in the case of China, they've got a problem that they did not fulfill the trade agreement that they signed in the big ceremony I think you were at in January 2020. The president had an executive order to look into exactly how did they not fulfill or not honor that agreement. I've been told it's quite large. They didn't buy anywhere near the 200 billion extra purchases they were supposed to make, partly, as you mentioned, of American soybeans. So that's a problem. The violation of a number of other promises is a problem. The good news is President Trump, I think quite sincerely, keeps saying that Xi Jinping is my friend. And that's because they've had 5 summits in person, sometimes 3 hours at a time. They exchanged letters all the time. They used to average a phone call every other month. So President Trump's got a lot of knowledge of Xi Jinping, and that's reciprocal. The Chinese side often praises President Trump as being brilliant, knowing what he's doing, being very tough. But now in 30 minutes, Liz, we're coming to the showdown at OK Corral, where the Chinese response could be quite harsh. They could go quite far in responding, and now they're leaking, as of about 12 hours ago, that they're bringing Japan and South Korea with them. There's some kind of a joint response. That'd be a nightmare if it's true. I hope it's not true.
Well, okay, a couple of things here. The president calls Xi his friend. A friend deceiveth me once, shame on him. If twice, shame on me. If Xi did not come through with buying what he promised he would buy, I can completely understand what the president is doing here. And in the end, it feels like he's very much intent on rewiring the entire trade landscape to make it fairer. We get that. But you just said they could be very harsh on us. In what form would that take, if you had to guess?
They could raise tariffs on some key sales we make to China, number one. Number two, they could go to other areas. They're already having daily military exercises around Taiwan, 10 to 20 ships. 10 to 20 bombers, calling the president of Taiwan yesterday a kind of a green parasite caterpillar. So they could escalate on the Taiwan front. They are dangling out the idea that they might help us with the Ukraine peace plan. There's actually a Chinese peace plan for over the past year. The Russians don't like it. It's slightly more positive than what other countries have offered. They could withdraw their help on the Ukraine peace plan. So this is a great power. They're number 2 in the world. There's a lot of things they could do to counter President Trump. I hope they don't try it. I hope it doesn't descend into a really harsh trade war. But you can't rule that out. That's why it's so important that President Trump keeps saying Xi Jinping is my friend. I think he believes it.
Okay,
but a lot's going to hang on that.
Let me throw this in then. If that is true, and there's very kind talk in between, or at least among, when they're talking about each other, President Xi and President Trump, Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, this weekend was in Asia, and he said the U.S. is building a war, these are his words, a war-fighting headquarters in Japan, and he reportedly told his counterparts he sees war with China as, quote, inevitable. And then the Chinese ministry clapped back and basically said, if the U.S. insists on that, we will win any war, whether it's trade or an actual real battle. Are we heading toward some type of superpower showdown?
Yes, we're heading toward it, but I don't think Pete Hegseth actually used those exact words. He was more discreet. Number one. Number two, the combat center in Japan has been long on the books. We have a treaty with Japan that goes back to 1950, but we've never actually had a command center in Japan that our forces can work together. So that's a good step forward. I do tend to be an optimist myself that the Chinese will hold back from a maximum response. They'll do something quite close to what Trump is going to announce in 20 minutes that he's going to do, but I don't think they'll escalate. Now, I could be wrong. They could escalate. This could become a very harsh exchange of the two countries. But as I say, there's so much knowledge on both sides from these meetings that you have to hope President Trump's going to calibrate, Liz, that's the key word, calibrate very carefully exactly how much punishment he's going to administer on China in the coming hour.
You know, you talk about what China would do. China, I was talking to a bunch of CEOs over the weekend, and China, they say, has been very smart. They are already targeting specific counties and states, red states and counties, where they will hand down these they will increase their
They did that
tariffs.
last time. They did that last time.
Okay, so that's their playbook, correct?
Yes.
But here's my question, Michael, and I really hope you can answer this. You now have Canada saying it's ready to build a pipeline for natural gas to go to its far west coast so that they can export to China. And then, as you already mentioned, the Japan, Korea, China deal that they might really kind of get together on as far as trade. Are we pushing our friends into the arms of the enemy? When I say our friends, I mean Canada and Mexico and the European Union.
Well, yes, but don't forget that what they have in common is not doing enough on the fentanyl problem. Canada and Mexico have made progress. They've made phone calls. They've come in person. China has not done that. China really stiffed President Trump. They put out a so-called white paper the first week in March saying that China is doing enough on fentanyl. We're not going to do any more. This is an American internal problem. You've got to stop using drugs. It's really very insulting so-called white paper. I myself was surprised the Chinese were so adamant not to help us on the fentanyl crisis. So that may be figured in when President Trump calibrates what to do about China. He's got to figure in the fentanyl refusal to help anymore. That's a kind of a slap in the face, frankly, Liz.
You know, economists across the board say tariffs will raise prices, Michael, on American consumers. Some, and most of them are Democrats, let's be sure, call it a national tax.
Right.
But there are some Republicans who are disinclined to go all in and cheer these tariffs. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, he was on Kudlow last night. We played the soundbite where he said, we actually don't know. We don't know if they will raise prices. We don't know if it will hurt growth. To me, that's code for, I don't think it's going to help kind of thing. And I only say that because otherwise he'd be like, this is going to work. What do you think eventually happens? Because there is word right now that Senate Democrats will force a vote, possibly as early as tonight, on scaling back the Canadian tariffs. They may have they may have been able to corral a couple of Republicans on that. And that would mean that Republicans, for the first time in the Senate, would be going kind of out there on the record saying, yeah, this part we don't think is a good idea, Mr. President.
Well, you're right. The position of the Republican Party for decades has been free trade. Tariffs were bad. The theory was tariffs caused World War II. But President Trump, very thoughtfully, in a book 25 years ago, Liz, he laid out the plan. I suspect he's continuing in the coming hour. That book is called The America We Deserve. It was all about tariffs. And now our only chance to increase our global competitiveness and our growth rate is going to be tariffs. Why? Not because we like tariffs as such, but Trump laid out in actually several other books that tariffs are a way to level the playing field and stop this horrendous ripping off of America in our poor trade deals. So this is not new to Trump. He was against the Republican Party free trade theory. And now he's essentially won a mandate. So I think Trump's got his own new ideas.
Are you invited to the Rose Garden event?
I'm here with you, Liz.
Thank you so much. Michael Pillsbury, we so appreciate it.